The descent into darkness. The vast expanse of space stretched endlessly before the Gallant Venture, its once proud hull now bearing the scars of recent battle. Within its corridors, the sound of boots against metal deck plates echoed ominously as Wyatt Staples, the newly appointed KN Banneret, moved with deadly purpose. His white stag emblem stood in stark contrast against his black armor, a symbol that had become synonymous with both hope and terror. Clara's words still rang in his ears, "Show them no mercy, but remember who you are." The princess's command had been clear, yet there was something else in her voice, an understanding of the storm that raged within him. The traitors had not just threatened the crown, they had threatened her. The ship's internal lighting flickered, casting strange shadows that danced across the walls. The damage from the earlier engagement with the Drazen had left much of the vessel's systems in disarray. Wyatt's tactical display showed multiple heat signatures converging on his position, desperate crew members seeking escape routes that no longer existed. Banneret Staples, Leopold Darer's voice crackled through his comm, distorted by the ship's comm scramblers. "I've secured the hangar bay. No shuttles will leave without our permission. But be advised, internal sensors show massive movement throughout the vessel. They're organizing." Wyatt acknowledged with a grunt, checking his soul snatchers. The twin weapons had already claimed lives today, but he knew they would demand more before this was done. Ahead, he could hear the panicked voices of crew members, their loyalty to Felicity Center about to be tested against their will to live. As he rounded the corner, he encountered his first real resistance. A group of 12 personnel, a mix of auxilia forces and noble-born officers, stood in formation. Their reactions told him everything he needed to know about their resolve. The nobles stood behind their common-born shields, just as they had always done. Intruder! The warning cry came too late. Wyatt's first shot pierced the lead auxilia's shield like it was paper, the specialized ammunition proving its worth against the inferior protection. The woman fell without a sound, her last expression one of surprise rather than pain. His second and third shots found similar marks, and suddenly the organized group devolved into chaos. The remaining auxilia tried to form a defensive line, but their training meant nothing against Wyatt's superior weaponry and skill. 2 more fell before they could even raise their weapons. A noble attempted to rally them, shouting commands that fell on deaf ears as survival instinct took over. "Stand your ground," the noble cried, his voice cracking with fear. "In the name of Lady Felicity." His words were cut short by a precise shot that sent him sprawling. The remaining auxilia broke ranks, some throwing down their weapons while others tried to flee. Wyatt dispatched those who chose to run, he couldn't risk them regrouping or warning others. Through his tactical display, Wyatt could see the larger picture forming. Felicity's forces were not just retreating, they were fracturing. Some moved toward the escape pods, others toward defensive positions, and a select few seemed to be heading toward what his map identified as secure storage areas. "Lady Felicity has abandoned us." The cry came from somewhere ahead, followed by the sound of fighting. Internal strife, exactly what Clara had predicted. Moving deeper into the ship, Wyatt activated his neural link to the ship's systems that Leopold had helped him establish. Security cameras showed him glimpses of the chaos spreading through every deck. The traitors' unity was breaking down exactly as planned, their fear of what awaited them overwhelming their loyalty to their failed cause. A notification flashed across his HUD, someone was trying to access the ship's main armory. Wyatt altered his course, his boots leaving bloody prints on the deck. He approached another intersection when his sensors detected movement. A group of engineers, led by a Marine in full combat gear, was attempting to bypass a security door. Without hesitation, Wyatt tossed a grenade into their midst. The explosion sent bodies flying, and the survivors barely had time to register what had happened before his soul snatchers ended their confusion permanently. As he stepped over the bodies, Wyatt accessed the ship's internal communications. The chatter was frantic, filled with conflicting orders and desperate pleas for direction. Some called for surrender, others for a last stand, and a few spoke of taking their chances in escape pods. "This is Senior Officer Kazmir Khan," a voice cut through the chaos. "All loyal forces are to converge on the bridge. We will not abandon Lady Felicity to this commoner's justice." Wyatt's grip on his weapons tightened. Kazmir Khan, one of the masterminds behind the rebellion. The man who had helped orchestrate the threats against Clara. His presence on the bridge confirmed what Wyatt had suspected: the leadership was cornered, and they knew it. A new message flashed across his HUD: "Wyatt, the Royal Marines are 20 minutes out. Whatever you're planning, do it fast." Leopold's warning was unnecessary. Wyatt had no intention of dragging this out. He checked his ammunition and shields, then pulled up the most direct route to the bridge. The path would take him through the heart of the ship, where the heaviest resistance would be waiting. But that didn't matter. Nothing would stop him from reaching his targets. "I'm coming for you, Kazmir," Wyatt muttered, advancing into the darkness ahead. "You and Felicity both." The lights flickered once more, and in that moment of darkness, Wyatt Staples disappeared into the shadows of the Gallant Venture, becoming the very embodiment of retribution that the traitors feared most. Fractured loyalty. The smell of burnt electronics and discharged weapons filled the air as Wyatt made his way through the ship's mid-decks. The bodies he'd left behind served as silent markers of his passage, each one a testament to the price of betrayal. But ahead, he could hear the sounds of conflict, and these weren't from his doing. "Stand down, in the name of House Centur." The command echoed through the corridors, followed by the distinctive crack of rifle fire. "House Centur is finished," came the reply, accompanied by more gunfire. "We won't die for their pride." Wyatt approached the intersection cautiously, his tactical display showing two groups of heat signatures engaged in combat. Through the ship's cameras, he could see Felicity's loyalists exchanging fire with a group of deserters trying to reach the escape pods. The situation was deteriorating exactly as Clara had predicted: the traitors were turning on each other. A sudden explosion rocked the deck, and emergency shutters began closing throughout the section. Someone had triggered the ship's emergency protocols, either in an attempt to contain the fighting or to slow Wyatt's advance. It wouldn't matter either way. "Leopold," Wyatt sub-vocalized through his comm status on the ship's systems. "The haywire mines did more damage than expected," Leopold replied. "Life support is stable, but navigation and weapons are completely offline. They're trapped in a dying ship, Wyatt. And they know it." The information confirmed what Wyatt had suspected. The traitors' options were rapidly dwindling: surrender to him, or face the void of space. Neither choice promised mercy. As he rounded the corner, Wyatt came face to face with the aftermath of the internal fighting. Bodies from both sides littered the corridor, and a wounded officer was propped against the wall, clutching a bleeding shoulder. The man's eyes widened at the sight of Wyatt's approaching figure. "Wait," the officer called out, raising his good hand. "I can tell you where they're keeping the classified documents, the real reason for this rebellion." Wyatt paused, his soul snatchers trained on the wounded man. "Speak quickly." "Secure storage A7, the officer gasped. "Felicity, she made a deal with the Drazen. The attack wasn't supposed to happen like this. There was a plan." A shot rang out from further down the corridor, and the officer slumped forward, dead. Wyatt dove for cover as more rounds impacted where he had been standing. Through his tactical display, he could see a group of elite guards taking up defensive positions. "Kill the traitor," their leader shouted. "Lady Felicity's orders, 2 million credits to whoever brings him down." So, Felicity was getting desperate. Wyatt checked his weapons and prepared for what would be his hardest fight yet. These weren't ordinary auxilia or panicked crew members, these were trained killers who knew how to work as a unit. The firefight that ensued was brutal and precise. The elite guards coordinated their attacks, trying to pin Wyatt down while others moved to flank him. But they hadn't counted on his combat augments or his intimate knowledge of shipboard warfare. Wyatt threw his last grenade, not at the guards, but at the ceiling above them. The explosion sent debris raining down, disrupting their formation. In the chaos that followed, he struck with lethal efficiency. His soul snatchers found gaps in their armor, exploiting weaknesses that only a former auxilia would know about. When it was over, 6 more bodies added to his count. But Wyatt's mind was on what the officer had revealed. A deal with the Drazen? That would explain much about the recent events, but it also meant that reaching secure storage A7 had become a priority. He accessed the ship's layout through his neural link. The storage section wasn't far, but it lay on a different path than the one leading to the bridge. Time was running out, the Royal Marines would be arriving soon, and he needed to decide which truth was more important, the documents that could expose the full scope of the conspiracy, or the architects of betrayal themselves. A notification flashed in his HUD, more groups were converging on his position, drawn by the sound of combat. But there was something else, a familiar energy signature emanating from the direction of the storage section. The same type of signature he'd encountered during previous missions involving Drazen technology. The decision was made. Wyatt set off toward secure storage A7, his steps purposeful and quick. Whatever secrets lay within those walls, he would uncover them before Felicity's loyal followers could destroy the evidence. Behind him, the lights continued to flicker, and the sounds of discharge weapons echoed through the halls of the dying ship. The Gallant Venture had become a tomb for some, a prison for others, but for Wyatt Staples, it was simply another battlefield, one that would reveal truths that could shake the very foundation of the Empire. Buried secrets. The path to secure storage A7 was eerily quiet compared to the chaos that filled the rest of the ship. Wyatt's tactical display showed fewer heat signatures in this section, either the crew had abandoned these decks, or someone had cleared them out deliberately. Neither option was comforting. The Drazen energy signature grew stronger as he approached, pulsing with an otherworldly rhythm that his sensors could barely interpret. Whatever lay behind those doors, it wasn't standard Imperial technology. "Leopold," Wyatt whispered through his comm, "I'm picking up strange readings from storage A7. Can you access the manifest?" Static answered him for several seconds before Leopold's voice broke through. "Negative. Those records are isolated from the main system." "But Wyatt, I'm detecting power fluctuations consistent with a data purge in progress. They were destroying evidence." Wyatt quickened his pace, but movement ahead forced him to take cover. A squad of security officers was positioned outside the storage room, their weapons trained on the approach vectors. Unlike the previous defenders, these men and women wore the distinctive black and gold armor of House Centur's personal guard. "Hold position," their commander ordered. "Lady Felicity wants this section secured at all costs. Nothing leaves this room, especially not that commoner." Wyatt analyzed their formation through his tactical display. 8 guards, all wearing top-tier shield generators and armed with military-grade weapons. A frontal assault would be suicide, even with his superior equipment. But time wasn't on his side, every moment spent in combat was another moment for crucial evidence to be destroyed. The decision was made for him when his neural link picked up a transmission from inside the storage room, "Purge at 60%. Estimated time to completion, 3 minutes. Wyatt reached for his last remaining grenade, then paused. Instead, he accessed the ship's damaged systems through his neural link. The haywire mines had left much of the vessel's infrastructure in chaos, but perhaps that chaos could be turned to his advantage. With precise commands, he triggered a cascade failure in the environmental systems. Warning klaxons blared as emergency shutters began closing throughout the section, including the ones protecting the storage room. "System malfunction," one of the guards shouted. "The shutters." Wyatt struck before they could react. His first shots took down the 2 guards nearest to the storage room entrance. As the others turned to face this new threat, he was already moving, using the closing shutters as cover. His soul snatchers found their marks with deadly precision, each shot exploiting gaps in their expensive armor. The commander managed to get off a burst of fire that depleted Wyatt's shields by 30%, but a return shot through the visor ended any further resistance. The remaining guards fell in quick succession, their superior equipment proving inadequate against Wyatt's combination of skill and tactical knowledge. Inside the storage room, monitors displayed streams of data being systematically erased. 3 technicians looked up in horror as Wyatt entered, their hands still on their consoles. "Step away," Wyatt ordered, his weapons trained on them. "Now." They complied, but one reached for a hidden pistol. Wyatt's shot took her in the chest before she could clear the holster. The other 2 raised their hands, trembling. "The purge." One of them started. "Can be stopped," Wyatt finished, moving to the main console. Through his neural link, he began fighting against the deletion protocols. The Drazen energy signature was stronger here, emanating from a sealed container in the corner of the room. What he found in the surviving data files confirmed his worst fears. Detailed communications between House Centur and Drazen operatives, spanning months before the rebellion. Weapons schematics. Strategic planning documents. But most damning of all, proof that the attack on the Imperial fleet had been coordinated with the Drazen from the start. "This wasn't just a rebellion," Wyatt muttered. "It was treason on a scale we never imagined." A new transmission cut through his comm. "Wyatt." Leopold's voice was urgent. "Multiple groups converging on your position. They know you found something. Whatever you're going to do with that evidence, do it fast." Wyatt quickly began transferring the surviving data to his secured storage. The Drazen container would have to wait, the approaching forces were too numerous to fight while protecting both the evidence and prisoners. "Move," he ordered the surviving technicians. "You're coming with me." But as they headed for the exit, one of them spoke. "You don't understand. Lady Felicity, she's not the one you should be worried about. There's something bigger." The technician's words were cut short by a massive explosion that rocked the entire deck. Emergency barriers slammed down, and Wyatt's tactical display filled with new heat signatures. The traitors were making their final stand, and they'd chosen this moment to spring their trap. Through the smoke and chaos, Wyatt saw them, elite shock troops in unmarked armor, moving with a precision that spoke of extensive combat experience. Their weapons weren't Imperial standard issue, and their tactics, they moved like Drazen commandos. "They're here," the surviving technician screamed. "The sleeper agents, they've been aboard the whole time." Wyatt's mind raced as the pieces fell into place. The Drazen hadn't just coordinated with the traitors, they'd embedded their own operatives within the rebellion. And now, with their plan exposed, they were emerging from the shadows. His shields flared as the first volley of fire struck his position. These weren't ordinary rounds, they were using some kind of modified ammunition that seemed designed specifically to counter Imperial shield technology. "Leopold," Wyatt called through the comm as he returned fire, "get this data to Clara. Now." The Drazen, they're not just allies. They've infiltrated. Static filled the channel as something jammed all communications. Through the smoke, Wyatt could see more figures approaching, their armor bearing subtle markings that he'd seen in classified reports about Drazen special operations units. The technicians were already dead, cut down by precise fire from the attacking forces. Wyatt checked his soul snatchers, ammunition was running low, and his shields were recovering slower than usual, affected by whatever technology the Drazen were using. He had the evidence, but he was cut off from both retreat and advance. And somewhere above, Felicity and Casimir were still waiting, perhaps knowing all along that this moment would come. The Drazen operatives were closing in from all sides, their weapons trained on his position. Wyatt's tactical display showed no clear path of escape, but then again, escape had never been his intention. With deliberate calm, he checked his weapons one final time. If he was going to die here, he would ensure that the truth died with him. His neural link confirmed that the data transfer to Leopold was complete. Now all that remained was to ensure that no one stopped that information from reaching Clara. The smoke began to clear, revealing the full extent of the forces arrayed against him. At their head stood a figure in ornate combat armor, bearing markings that Wyatt had only seen in the most classified of Imperial intelligence briefings. Impressive, the figure spoke, its voice distorted by its helm. But ultimately futile. You've stumbled into something far larger than your petty civil war, Wyatt Staples. The question is, are you prepared to learn just how deep this conspiracy truly goes? Shadow War. The Drazen commander's words hung in the smoke-filled air as Wyatt assessed his situation. His tactical display showed 15 elite operatives surrounding his position, each armed with weapons that could pierce Imperial shields. But more concerning was what his neural link had detected, subtle energy signatures suggesting there were more Drazen agents throughout the ship than anyone had suspected. Your rebellion was just a cover, Wyatt stated, his soul snatchers trained on the commander. A distraction while you infiltrated the Empire's ranks. Perceptive, the commander replied. House Centur's ambition made them perfect puppets. But now that you've uncovered our presence, we can't allow you to leave this room alive. Wyatt's mind raced through his options. The evidence was already transmitting to Leopold, but these weren't just any Drazen forces, they were clearly part of something bigger, something that could threaten the entire Empire. The Royal Marines will be here soon, Wyatt warned, though his tactical display showed no sign of their approach through the calm blackout. The commander laughed, a harsh sound through their helm's distortion. Do you think we haven't planned for that? This ship is more than just a battlefield, it's about to become a message to your empire. In that moment, Wyatt's neural link caught a fragment of encrypted data, coordinates being transmitted throughout the ship. His blood ran cold as he decoded them. The Drazen weren't just planning to fight, they were positioning themselves for something much worse. The attack came without warning. 3 operatives moved in perfect synchronization, their modified weapons spitting death at his position. Wyatt dove behind a console as his shields flared dangerously. These weren't ordinary soldiers, their movement spoke of years of specialized training. But Wyatt hadn't survived this long by being predictable. As they pressed their attack, he activated his neural link's full combat protocols. The ship's damaged systems responded to his commands, and suddenly the deck plates beneath 2 of the operatives gave way, sending them plummeting to the level below. The distraction was all he needed. His soul snatchers roared to life, each shot carefully placed to exploit the smallest weaknesses in the Drazen's advanced armor. 2 more fell before they could adjust their formation, but the others were already adapting to his tactics. Impressive improvisation, the commander noted, raising their own weapon. But futile. The charges are already set. This ship will become a tomb for everyone aboard, including Lady Felicity and her conspirators. A tragic accident that will further destabilize the Empire. Wyatt's tactical display suddenly lit up with new information. His neural link had detected multiple explosive devices throughout the ship's critical systems. The Drazen weren't just planning to kill everyone aboard, they were going to destroy the evidence of their involvement completely. Leopold, Wyatt sub-vocalized through his neural link, hoping some signal could penetrate the jamming. If you can hear this, get word to Clara. The ship is rigged to blow. The firefight intensified as more Drazen operatives joined the battle. Wyatt's shields were holding, but barely. Each exchange of fire was a calculated dance of death, with both sides using the room's architecture for cover. But something was wrong. The commander's tactics seemed designed to keep him pinned in this section, away from both the bridge and the ship's critical systems. They were playing for time, but why? The answer came as his neural link detected new movement throughout the ship. The remaining loyal forces under Felicity's command were being systematically eliminated, not by his actions, but by more Drazen operatives emerging from hiding. This wasn't just about destroying evidence anymore. The Drazen were cleaning house, eliminating everyone who knew about their involvement. And somewhere above, Felicity and Casimir still waited, perhaps now realizing they had been nothing more than pawns in a much larger game. A sudden explosion rocked the deck, and Wyatt's tactical display showed new heat signatures approaching from below. But these weren't Drazen forces, the signatures matched Imperial combat patterns. Breach teams detected on multiple decks, a Drazen operative reported. Royal Marines have boarded ahead of schedule. The commander's response was immediate: initiate Protocol 0. No witnesses. Wyatt's neural link screamed warnings as explosive devices throughout the ship began activating. He had seconds to make a choice: pursue the commander and potentially uncover more about the Drazen's plans, or race to prevent the ship's destruction. The decision was made for him as his tactical display showed Royal Marines engaging Drazen forces near the ship's main reactor. If those explosives detonated, the resulting chain reaction would destroy not just the Gallant Venture, but any nearby vessels as well. With a final burst of fire that forced the Drazen operatives to cover, Wyatt accessed the ship's emergency systems through his neural link. The path to the reactor would be crawling with enemies, but he had no choice. The truth about the Drazen infiltration had to survive, and that meant keeping the ship intact long enough for the Royal Marines to secure it. As he fought his way out of the storage section, Wyatt could hear the commander's laughter echoing through the smoke-filled corridors. The real war wasn't between the Empire and its rebels anymore, it was against an enemy that had been hiding in plain sight all along. And somewhere above, in the bridge of the dying ship, Felicity and Casimir were about to learn the true cost of their ambition. Reckoning. The path to the reactor was a gauntlet of death. Wyatt's tactical display showed multiple firefights breaking out across every deck as Royal Marines encountered pockets of Drazen resistance. The ship's corridors had become a maze of combat zones, with neither side willing to give ground. Status report, Wyatt demanded through his neural link, hoping the Royal Marines' arrival had weakened the communication jamming. Leopold's voice broke through, fragmented but audible: Marines, secured lower decks, but Drazen forces, concentrated around, critical systems. Data transfer, complete. Clara knows. The transmission cut off as another explosion rocked the ship. Wyatt's tactical display showed the reactor's containment systems were starting to fail. The Drazen's explosives hadn't detonated yet, but the damage from the ongoing battle was taking its toll. As he rounded a corner, Wyatt encountered a scene that confirmed his worst fears. A squad of Royal Marines lay dead, their armor bearing the distinctive burn marks of Drazen weapons. But what caught his attention were the bodies among them, crew members wearing House Centur's colors, also killed by the same weapons. The Drazen were truly cleaning house, eliminating everyone who might know about their involvement. And they were doing it with a precision that spoke of long-term planning. Wyatt's neural link suddenly detected a priority transmission cutting through the jamming: all forces, be advised. Bridge security has been compromised. Lady Felicity and Senior Officer Khan are, wait, what are you? The transmission ended in static. The pieces clicked into place. The Drazen weren't just trying to destroy evidence, they were systematically eliminating everyone who knew about their operation, starting with the leadership. This is Wyatt Staples to all Royal Marine forces, Wyatt broadcast on the emergency channel. Be advised, enemy forces are disguised as crew members. Trust no one without direct confirmation. His warning came just as his tactical display showed more heat signatures converging on his position. But these moved differently than the previous Drazen forces, more desperate, less coordinated. Please. Don't shoot. A voice called out as figures emerged from a side corridor. It was Casimir Khan, along with a handful of bridge officers. Their uniforms were stained with blood, and fear had replaced their former arrogance. The Drazen, Casimir gasped, his usual composure shattered. They took the bridge. Felicity, they executed her right in front of us. We never knew, they were using us all along. Wyatt kept his soul snatchers trained on the group. The reactor. How do we stop it? The main engineering station, one of the officers spoke up. But the Drazen have it locked down. They're waiting for the containment systems to fail before triggering their explosives. The chain reaction will destroy half the fleet. A new alert flashed across Wyatt's tactical display. Royal Marines had secured the lower decks, but they wouldn't reach the engineering section in time. The reactor's containment was failing faster than expected. "You're coming with me," Wyatt ordered Casimir and his group. "You helped create this mess. Now you'll help end it." The journey to engineering was a nightmare of close-quarters combat. The Drazen had positioned their best operators to guard their endgame, and every meter gained was paid for in blood. Casimir and his officers proved their worth, using their knowledge of the ship's layout to find alternate routes past the heaviest resistance. Finally, they reached the engineering section's main entrance. Inside, Wyatt's tactical display showed multiple Drazen signatures, and at their center, the commander he'd encountered earlier. "They'll have the reactor controls locked down," Casimir warned. "And their weapons, they're designed specifically to counter our technology. A frontal assault would be suicide." Wyatt's neural link connected to the engineering section systems. The Drazen had control of the main consoles, but there was something they hadn't considered: his intimate knowledge of Imperial ship design, gained from years of service in the Auxilia. "Keep them distracted," he ordered Casimir's group. "Make them think you're trying to breach the main entrance." While the officers began their feint, Wyatt accessed a maintenance shaft, a tight passage that even the ship's engineers rarely used. As he crawled through the cramped space, his tactical display showed the Drazen responding to Casimir's distraction. He emerged behind the enemy position just as the reactor's warnings reached critical levels. The Drazen commander was at the main console, preparing to trigger their explosives. "It's over," Wyatt announced, his soul snatchers aimed at the commander's head. The commander turned, their helmet's visor reflecting the reactor's warning lights. "You don't understand what you're interfering with, Banneret. This goes beyond your petty civil war. The Empire is weak, corrupted. What we offer is evolution." "No," Wyatt replied. "What you offer is chaos. And I've seen enough of that for one day." The commander moved with incredible speed, drawing a weapon that hummed with dark energy. But Wyatt was faster. His soul snatchers roared one final time, and the commander's helmet shattered, revealing a face marked with Drazen cybernetic implants. The other operatives opened fire, but Wyatt was already moving. His shields flared as he fought his way to the reactor controls. Shots pierced his armor, but he pushed through the pain. The reactor was seconds from collapse. With the last of his strength, Wyatt connected his neural link directly to the reactor's systems. Emergency protocols responded to his override codes, and slowly, the warning lights began to fade. The battle for engineering continued around him as Royal Marines finally breached the entrance, engaging the remaining Drazen forces. But Wyatt's focus was on the data streaming through his neural link, proof of not just the rebellion's treachery, but of a deeper conspiracy that threatened the Empire's very foundations. Hours later, as medical teams treated the wounded and Royal Marines secured the ship, Wyatt stood on the bridge of the Gallant Venture. The cost had been high, but the truth had been preserved. The Drazen infiltration had been exposed, though he knew this was just the beginning of a longer conflict. "Clara will want answers," Leopold's voice came through clearly now, the jamming finally lifted. "She'll have them," Wyatt replied, looking out at the stars beyond the bridge's viewport. "But more importantly, she'll know who she can trust." The Gallant Venture's engines hummed as emergency crews worked to stabilize her systems. She would survive, much like the Empire she served. But things would never be the same. The Shadow War had begun, and Wyatt Staples stood ready to face whatever challenges it would bring. In the end, it wasn't just about loyalty or duty. It was about truth, about seeing beneath the surface of things. The Black Ship had revealed its secrets, but Wyatt knew there would be more battles to come. And next time, they would be ready.